podcast with it's good morning for me, Scott. It's good. Well, it's actually good morning for you too
It's
in
also good morning for
Maya.
me.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Scott Clary. You are the host of Success Story podcast. What do we
Thank you for
need to
having me
know about
on.
your podcast? I've been listening for an awfully long time. I'll be honest, I just shared with you. I was surprised you said yes to talking to me, so I'm feeling incredibly grateful. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to chat about my show for a couple
Yeah.
minutes. So, the pleasure is all mine. So, what should people know about my podcast? So, I recorded and started my podcast because I wanted to find an outlet. I think the best kind of entrepreneurs create content for themselves. That's at least in my opinion, and that's really why I started Success Story. When it first started, it was more geared towards business because that's the stage of life that I was at. But I realized that as I sort of grew in my career and I wasn't just working for somebody, but I was an entrepreneur, I wanted a resource. And I listened to resources that unpacked the playbooks of some of the most successful people in the world. And it's people that have sort of mastered their domain and were the 0.001% of their field or their industry. And I wanted to interview people that had accomplished incredible things. And that's really what the podcast is about. It's about unpacking the playbooks of the highest performers, and it could be mindset, it could be business, it could be entrepreneurship, it could be finance. It's topics that a high performing individual will find interesting to upskill themselves in their personal and professional life. And I think that what hopefully I do a decent job of on this show, because there's a lot of interview style shows as well. I'm not disillusioned to that, but the name of the show is Success Story. And obviously the people that I bring on, I've had like co-founder of Netflix and founder of Reebok, like very impressive people. But the whole concept of the show, even though it's called Success Story, this is kind of like that's why the name is so interesting, is because I try and unpack the more difficult parts of their career and what they had to go through to get to what we all see as this massive success. Because when you start to unpack the journeys of all these incredible people, you realize that nobody really was like a quote unquote overnight success, or nobody really had it easy, right? So I think that's really what I hope that I bring out, because those are the stories that I love to learn from. And I hope that there's other people. And so far, it's been proven true that there are a few other people in the world that also like hearing the ups, but also the downs of the people that have made these massive organizations or accomplished these incredible things. And then they teach their learnings along the way.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think your podcast is just filled with inspiring humans. And like you, Scott, I think I get the most out of the journey story, not
Mhm.
the, hey, I exited my business for X amount. And that's wonderful and incredibly inspiring, but it's definitely about the journey. And I think that your podcast does that so well. Scott, do you want to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to create the podcast and your background and your career journey? I think that's really interesting as
Yeah.
well.
So so I guess I'll start with a little bit of my career journey. So I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. I came from a very traditional 9 to 5, very safe and secure. I didn't have a crazy origin story. There was no point, thank God, that I was ever homeless or destitute or anything like that. But I did realize that having that safe comfort, I think, is actually, it's a blessing for sure. But the world that our parents came from and our grandparents came from, where we looked at job safety and security, I, I think can actually be more detrimental to our own growth than we actually realized. I think we understood that during COVID when people were being laid off. And I think we also understand that as a younger generation tries to figure out their career and how they're going to retire, and is there going to be a pension, and are they going to be safe and secure, and cost of living seems to be going up. So all that being said, my entrepreneurial journey, which has now turned into a podcast journey, was really about future proofing myself so that I would not have to worry about making money on someone else's terms. And it was just the fact that I looked at the pension that my dad was getting and the pension that my mom was getting from their careers, and I realized that that kind of environment really doesn't exist anymore. So the lack of security in my future and my retirement, combined with increasing cost of living and volatility in the job market, I said, I just want to take my career into my own hands, and I want to build something that will give me some sort of freedom. And I don't want to have to worry about like we saw with COVID, people that have worked in companies for 30 years being laid off and now trying to figure out how to readjust to what do I do to make money? How can I retire? That's a very scary thought. So instead of leaving it up to somebody else, I moved more and more away from 9 to 5s and closer and closer and closer to startups and trying to get a little bit of equity and trying to scale companies. And I saw a few get acquired and go through exit events. So that's sort of my journey from 9 to 5 to more early stage entrepreneurship to eventually, I I mean, the podcast, my personal brand, all of that's monetized now, of course, and that's 100% my own. So it's not just me having a little bit of a startup or helping a startup grow to be acquired, which is sort of that's now this is just 100% my own thing. So
Yeah.
the podcast and the brand and the newsletter and all of that is yeah, it's a podcast, but it's a business and it's 100% owned by me and I'm the entrepreneur and the podcast is the product. So yeah, so it was just a gradual journey away from I found it to be safer career-wise to build my own thing than to work for somebody else. That's the long-winded way of me
Yeah.
saying that. And the podcast in particular, just very briefly, there's 4 kinds of leverage in this world. So there is financial leverage, there's money, there's human capital, there's people, and there's also media. And I saw the opportunity to not just build a company, but build a form of leverage that would allow me to launch other companies in the future. So when I started the podcast, I was still in tech entrepreneur mode. I was chief revenue officer of a company. I helped them scale and eventually be acquired. But I realized that when I was building that company was going to be acquired and I was going to be at ground zero. I was going to have to start from scratch. And I knew the exit wasn't going to be enough to have FU money never work again.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm like, what's a business I can build that
Mm.
will support other things in the future? And that was where podcast came into play. That's a very strategic reason as to why I did it, because I knew that if I build an audience, this
Yeah.
company that I was working on at the time was acquired, I could, of course, launch new companies against that audience. That's the strategic reason. The more personal reason is because I really enjoy chatting with incredible people. So everything aligned, like the passion, the creativity that I had as a marketer aligned with this is a very tactical business strategy and a sound business strategy that can, again, not just future proof my career because the podcast is going to earn me money, but when this current tech company, again, that was ongoing and being built when I started it, when that's acquired in 10 years from now, and I have a big podcast, I can do whatever I want with that podcast. I can launch a new business. I can do coaching. I can do consulting. I can raise a fund. I can do whatever I want. And I mean, you've seen this with Gary V, builds a massive audience, then has Vayner Wines and or Empathy Wines and Vayner Sports and drops an NFT collection. So when you build a form of leverage like a massive media brand, then you have the opportunity to launch other things in the future. And it's all about just basically creating a more safe and secure future for yourself. And that's sort of the mindset that that's the thought process I went through when I built all this or when I started this.
Oh, I love that honesty because, yeah, I think you connect so well with your audience and it comes across, in your interviewing style that you're incredibly passionate
Yeah.
about, just talking to humans about
I'm
their,
just curious at the end
yeah,
of the day. So I mean, but that's the thing, right? So like my passion aligns with my vocation, with my job. And that's really that's why I've been doing it for 6 years. And that's why it's had like a level of success because yeah, I could have just, I just walked through the whole logical reason as to why I wanted to do it. But there's a lot of other ways that I could have secured my future or built something from scratch. And I think that the reason why the podcast has been successful is because it did align um, what I enjoy doing with a thing that could make money. And when you align those two things, I mean, we can talk about ikigai and talk
yeah,
about, what you're good at and what the market needs. But the point is, if you can continue to do something for a period of time, which truly means that you enjoy doing it and you have systems and processes that support you doing it, you will find a way to be successful at that thing. So like the podcast is 6 years old now. I
yeah,
enjoy doing it. I built systems and processes that allowed me to do it for the long run. I didn't burn out. I didn't run out of money. I found a way to continue it for an extended period of time so that after you do it for 600 episodes or 6+ years or 10 years or 1,000 episodes or 2,000 episodes, it becomes unreasonable for you to be not good at it because you've done it so many times. So just by virtue of doing it enough, you will eventually be successful at it. And this is like me speaking about a podcast, but it applies to any business. So you just have to find something you can stick with for the long run. But fortunately for me, mine was my show.
Yeah, well done. And Scott, just finally, if we're a listener of Yellow Shelf and we're new to the world of Scott Clary, where do we find you? What's the best way to connect with you? And I'll put this all in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate all of you for listening, and hopefully you check out an episode and you find some value in it. But all the social handles are pretty simple. They're at Scott D. Clary, and then podcast is successstorypodcast.com, and you can see all the episodes there.
Ah, awesome. Scott, I'll share that out. Scott, thank you so
Thank you.
much. So grateful that you took some time to talk to Yellow Shelf. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.